Hi, LA Progressive friends and readers. We're back again. This is Sharon and Dick. We hope you'll subscribe to LA Progressive. And once again, we're with our colleague Nadia Ahmad, who's a law professor in Orlando, Florida, uh, a fellow at the Rutgers Center for Security, Race Rights, and a PhD candidate at Yale University in environmental studies. And she's also pretty involved in Democratic Party politics. How you doing, Nadia?
Thank you, Dick and Sharon, for having me on today. I'm doing well. And last week, I also finished up my term as co-chair of the DNC's Interfaith Council.
My
Oh,
goodness. And you're well, Dick already said you're a PhD candidate at Yale and the co-founder of Ceasefire 2024. I don't know where you find the time to also write these powerful pieces like the one that we're going to be talking about right now. If Democrats can't face Gaza, they can't face 2028, which is currently published in the LA Progressive. So Nadia, tell us what prompted you to write this and what evidence do you have to support your assertion that Democrats can't face 2028?
I think there's a number of people that have left the party because of the situation in Gaza, and data across the spectrum shows that if the Democrats would change their position on Gaza and really adhere to what the base wants, they would be in a better position for the midterms as well as for 2028. And the reason I write is because these issues aren't complicated, but the party elite makes them complicated. And in terms of what the evidence is, you have children dying, you have a famine that's ongoing, you have journalists who are dying, you have doctors who are dying. And inside the Democratic Party, the problem isn't actually the base, it's really the leadership culture that really treats this moral emergency as a messaging headache. And for me, I think I'm really done with a lot of the euphemisms. And I think that we really need to move forward as a party for the sake of protecting our own democracy.
Yeah, I know out here in California during the last election that a lot of our colleagues who would ordinarily vote for the Democratic Party could not get over the fact that the Democratic Party, at least its presidential candidate, could not take a strong position in favor of Palestinians in Gaza. They waffled, they wobbled. Oftentimes they would, and every time they'd bring up the fact, well, what about when Hamas attacked Israel? And I think that killed the campaign right there.
So you say in your piece that the DNC's failures were cultural as much as political, speaking of the 2024 campaign, and that they were embodied by figures like Ken Martin, whose elevation within the party leadership reflects the narrow, self-satisfied logic that helped lead Democrats off a cliff. So help me to understand, and for people who don't know who Ken Martin is, help me to understand his him being the embodiment of self-satisfied leadership.
So Ken Martin rose through the ranks of the Democratic Party and the DNC. He served as the chair of the Minnesota Democratic Party, and then earlier this year he was elected as the chair of the DNC. And many progressives had supported him, but like me, they were also disappointed by the way he handled this resolution, because inside the Democratic Party, the goal is really to raise funds instead of really to worry about losing votes. And I think that the base has really moved quite substantially on this issue since even we last discussed it in 2024 and even earlier this year in terms of support against sending arms to Israel is highest now than it has ever been, because we're watching not only the impacts of the killing spree, but also the humanitarian blockade with images that are absolutely grueling and horrific of children who are dying from starvation. And this has not happened in the Middle East at this scale before in modern history. And so the reason why people were upset with Ken Martin is because he did a very political move in terms of trying to bring forward a watered down resolution number 3, whereas resolution 18, which was brought forward by Allison Minnerly, who is a DNC member from Florida, which was a stronger resolution which called for a full arms embargo as well as the recognition of a Palestinian state. And that resolution couldn't even get past committee. And then she had sought to bring it from the DNC floor the next day, and the DNC abruptly ended its general meeting out of concerns of a school shooting. But I was at the DNC meeting on October 7th, right as it happened. We were watching it live, and the DNC just carried on its business. And so it was really that concern about accountability that prompted the DNC to all of a sudden abruptly end its meeting on Wednesday.
It often seems that, I mean, over the past 10 years, it seems that the DNC is oftentimes to the right of most Democrats, and they have stood in the way of, well, I mean, they stood in the way of Bernie Sanders. They pushed no fundamental change Biden on him. I mean, I don't mean to be down on it, but it doesn't seem like the DNC is in tune with most progressive Democrats that I know. Would you agree?
That's very true. Most people, the average person I know, even members of my own family, are not of the sense that, just hold your nose and vote for Democrats.
Right.
They see what the Democratic Party is doing, and it gives them reason to pause. And for some people, there's a divide in terms of that they think the politics don't matter, that their voice doesn't matter, and that's actually what the political system wants you to think, is that you don't have a voice and what you say doesn't matter. But I think what this resolution has showed that the effort by Allison Minnerly was that they sent emails in upwards of 250,000 emails, which is quite a Herculean task. And so they put that resolutions committee on notice, a number of who were from California. In fact, 4 members from the resolutions task force who were from California abstained in the vote. And so that shows you that they may have voted in favor of it or may have voted against it, but they didn't want to go on the record voting against it.
Yeah, yeah. One point that you make in your article is that Republicans have consolidated power. And it seems to me that they have consolidated power behind a particular ideology. And that is what has been lacking in the Democratic Party. So in your article, if Democrats can't face Gaza, they can't face 2028. It would seem to me that the Democratic Party has an opportunity to coalesce around a shared ideology, and that ideology being one of ceasefiring in Palestine. Is that your point in writing this article?
Yeah, the goal is to recognize that there's a strong anti-war movement, and even within the Democratic Party's own party platform has called for ending endless wars, which is what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, and even right now in Ukraine and the war with Russia. That we see this ongoing militarism that's happening, and the party's base does not favor it, and I think it's important to recognize that civilians, especially women and children, should never be collateral damage in situations of war. And the Israeli military has gone to town with killing anybody it can that stands in its way. And so what we're really watching is ethnic cleansing campaign, and there should be no reason for Democrats to sit idly by as this happens.
Yeah, amazingly, the latest thing is Bibi Netanyahu says he's going to have his forces, the IDF, clear out Gaza City, 1 million people, going to move out 1 million people who are already living in tents. And yet, here we are, we're still sending them arms. We're still sending them bombs. And you see the pictures of parts of Gaza that are utterly flattened and just look like Dresden after the firebombs in World War II. And yet people aren't up in arms about it. I mean, certain groups of people are up in arms, but most of the Democratic Party, at least its leaders, are not.
And that also goes to show you why you even have LA Progressive, is that the corporate media has been a party in favor of all of this war criminalization that has happened. And there's a lot of war propaganda that's happened. So even after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there was not wide public outrage against it. And even as the U.S. And Britain were going to march into war in Afghanistan and then into Iraq, even though there was massive public protest, the corporate media acted like everything was fine. And so this actually builds on and creates a sense of complacency as well as political apathy, which those who are in power want you to think is acceptable. And so moving forward, I think the Democratic Party needs to know that it's going to cost them elections. And so if they don't want to do it for the humanitarian purposes, they need to do it for their own sake. That they need to think about how awful it is. Even in Los Angeles, you have the military takeover of the streets, you have military takeover of the nation's capital. And are we going to let this issue hold us down, or really say that we just have to worry about ICE and forget about the IDF?
Yeah, back on the media for a second. For the longest time in this genocide, what's become a genocide in Gaza, if the mainstream media, New York Times in particular, and some of the broadcast networks, if they had anything to say about Gaza, it would always start with, and remember what happened on October 8th. And no mention of tens of thousands of Palestinians killed. Now, in recent months, perhaps, New York Times has written more even-handed or looked at the atrocious activities that Israel is inflicting on Palestine. But I still don't see very many Democratic leaders. I mean, even Mamdani, who wants to take a pro-Palestinian position, is backing off because New York City's standard Democrats are pushing on him.
And that's why it's so important that we get this message out. And that's why we're so grateful to you,
Right.
Nadia, for writing these kinds of pieces, because this is not just a problem for the people who live in Gaza. As much as they are directly impacted and it's devastating for them, this is a worldwide crisis, a crisis of morality, a crisis of United States contributing and facilitating this devastating, I don't even want to call it a war, but we Americans are a major contributing factor to this happening in the first place, and yet we act as if nothing is happening.
Yeah, and I think it's important because the world is never going to be the same after this. And for me, even as a mother, I can't even look at my own kids the same way. To think about kids overseas and how my government's bombs are falling on them, that my government is blocking humanitarian assistance to them. And even I think just realizing the helplessness that even from Egypt, they were putting grains of rice and food into water bottles. So just by chance that the water bottles may float from the sea over into Gaza. I mean, that's just the desperation, is that it's not as if there's no food there, it's just not allowed to go in because Israel wants all these millions of people to starve.
Well, Nadia, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Thank you for continuing to keep us informed. And I'm asking anyone that's listening to this to please share it. Please subscribe. Please let people know how the United States is helping to facilitate the deaths of what could possibly end up being millions. Thank you, Nadia. And, just keep on keeping on, and we will keep publishing you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate
Thank you.
it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Nadia. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.